What's up, everybody? This is Cam with Fishing with Cam. Today, I want to go over buzz baits and the follow-up baits I use with my buzz baits. Now, I've talked to a lot of anglers who don't know what follow-up baits are, or they don't use them to their best advantage. So I want to go over the baits I use in my setups and the best follow-up baits that I have with those setups. Now, if you're not using a follow-up bait, guys, I highly recommend it for those secondary bites whenever maybe you just missed that fish and you're looking for that fish to strike a second time. So I have three main setups for buzz baits. I don't just grab any buzz bait, tie it on, and throw it out there. I try to have a rhyme and a reason for which buzz bait I use in which situation. So we'll start with shallow water. So if I'm in shallow water, whether it have vegetation or not, I'm almost always going to use my frog buzzbait. So this is going to have a Stanley style frog, Stanley ribbit frog on the end of it. So it's going to have the flippers that kick. It's going to have the feet that actually move. It's going to have a lot of action. It's going to be a lot natural for coming off the bank. So if I'm going to be throwing this buzzbait, when I'm throwing in shallow water, I'm throwing to the bank out, and that's whether there's vegetation or not. Now, if I'm in a little bit deeper water and there is vegetation, I still may throw this. This is going to be the buzzbait I use in shallow water. Now, if I'm throwing this in shallow water and I miss that bass and I'm looking for my follow-up bait, I'm going to put this pole down and I'm going to grab one of two things. If I want to keep that follow-up bait on top of the water, I'm going to just take off the buzz bait and I'm going to be throwing a Stanley ribbit frog on top water. The great thing about these are you can work them slow or fast. I have a 7:3:1 ratio reel and a 5:3:1, so I can slap this on, or if I already have it on there, I can hurry up and pitch it in there, and I can work this slow or fast, hoping for that secondary reaction on the top water. Now, if I want to take that secondary bite off the top water, I'm going to throw a Ned rig. The great thing about the Ned rig, and this is from Gunnigan Baits, it does have a rattle in it. It is the blue sparkle on one side and a watermelon on the other. It's great. I love this color. And the great thing about this in shallow water is that it is weedless. So you can throw it in that vegetation if there's vegetation there, whether it be grass, cattails, lily pads, things like that. But it's also not going to sink so far that it's just going to pass the fish and he's not going to see it. It's still going to be in that shallow depth. The fish can see it, they can hear it. It's still going to have the reaction to it. The great thing about a Ned rig is there's still a lot of action to the end of the worm. So those are going to be my two follow-up baits. I almost always, if I'm flipping this in there, I'm going to be working it slow, and I'm just going to work it enough that it's going to bounce off the bottom to where the end of this just shakes and that rattle goes crazy. So if I'm looking for the secondary bite on top water, in shallow water, I can throw this out there fast or slow. If not, I'm going to drop it a little bit lower in the water column and throw a Ned rig. I've had a lot of success with that, especially if there's vegetation. Now, if I'm a little bit farther out in the water, a little bit deeper water, the fish are a little bit lower in the column, but they're looking up to feed, I'm going to throw an all blacked out minnow buzzbait. Now, I also have all white setup. If you know me, I love my all whites and all black setups. So I can throw this in that deeper vegetation. Maybe there's a lot of grass, but it's going to be deeper water where the fish are lower in the column and they're looking up. I'm especially going to throw this if I see a lot of bait fish on top moving. But this is one of my favorite go-tos in between 6 and, say, 8 to 10 foot of water. And if I miss that first bite and I'm looking for that follow-up bite, I'm going to throw one of two. If I want to keep it up higher in the water column, like the buzzbait would be on top water, I'm going to throw a weightless fluke. Again, all white or all black, but I'm going to throw a weightless fluke. It's going to stay super high in the column. You can twitch it. It's super easy, effective. It's a slower method retrieval that I use. I know some people throw them out and burn them in, but in this situation, I'm going to throw it out. I'm not going to let it sink very much, and I'm going to twitch it all the way in and make it look like a dying bait fish. Now, if I want to drop it a little bit lower in the column like I did the Ned rig in shallow water, I'm going to throw a weighted swim bait. Now, this is going to drop, I don't want it to drop very far, but I may let it drop, 2-3 feet, and then I'll start swimming this guy in. The great thing also about these baits is if you do slow them down, they'll sink a little bit farther. If you speed them up, then they will rise. So you have a lot of variability that you can play with these. Now, the next option that I have with buzz baits, if I'm way out deep water, maybe there is a rise in the terrain underneath, Maybe there are underwater rivers and stuff. Whatever it may be that I'm fishing deep in the water, I'm going to throw this guy. So, and typically, if it's windy, maybe it's cloudy, I'm just going to burn them in, throw them out, burn them in. So if I miss this guy and I'm looking for my follow-up bait, I almost always follow up with a really nice spinner bait, especially since I'm deep in the water. A spinner bait I will retrieve in two methods. So just like I would switch up the baits in the shallower water or the medium depth water, if you want to call it that, I'm going to retrieve this in two different methods. So if I throw it out there and I'm just retrieving it right back in, I'm going to keep it high in the column. Now, if I'm looking for a little bit more of a slower retrieval and I throw it out there, then I'm going to jig this guy back in, and that's going to allow it to move through a few different water columns, top versus maybe a few feet down, and that's going to be my option with those. So again, guys, if I'm fishing shallow water with vegetation, I'm going to be throwing a really nice frog buzz bait. I'm going to follow that up with a Ned rig or a topwater Stanley ribbit frog. If I'm fishing a little bit deeper water, whether there's vegetation or not, I'm going to be throwing a minnow buzz bait, especially if there's bait fish moving on top. I'm going to follow that up with higher in the column of a weightless fluke, lower in the column of a weighted swim bait. Now, again, if I'm fishing super deep water, I'm going to be throwing a three-bladed buzz bait, and I'm going to follow that up with a spinner bait. I can either throw it out there and retrieve it, or I can throw it out there and jig it in. Guys, these are my favorite buzz baits in those different situations, and they're my favorite follow-up baits for those. If you can get those follow-up baits to be successful, and you find what follow-up bait works best for you, it is a tournament changer, it's a game changer, and it can really help you get that fish to bite that second time. So let me know what you guys use as follow-up baits. Let me know what you guys use as buzz baits and what situations you use them in. And then let me know what you guys think of my buzz baits and my follow-up baits and how I use them. I'm always looking for new techniques to try, and I hope that you guys can try these techniques and it be successful for you. So until next time, guys, tight lines.